Yes, welcome back. This is F for Rap Critic. I am still Malik 16. This is still the home of plates and crates and the rap ruler. And no, I'm not going to take you back to 79, but I will take you back to 97 because we're still talking about the classic album Wu-Tang Forever by Wu-Tang Clan. And like we always do at this time, we're only focusing on one side. We're talking about Disc 2. I don't need to be a broken record. Like and subscribe to the channel. Let's talk about the record. Category 2, the rap performance on this album. Let's get right into it. Dimension 1, personality and charisma. There's no secret. You have 9 members with the additional factor of Capadonna making it a smooth 10, and each and every one of these rappers oozes a distinct personality. You're getting nothing but a bunch of personalities on this album, if nothing else. And so RZA, depending on the track, is giving you these vacillations between the ignorant side of RZA and the super mathematical Abbott side. And Method Man is giving you the calmest Method Man that you had ever heard up to that point. So if you're looking for Into the 36 Chambers, rah-rah, hook singing Method Man, you're getting more of the laid back, observant Method Man. Inspect the Deck is probably giving you the most consistent out of every member. Him and Old Dirty remain the same as they were on the previous album. More of what you love, more sharpness from Deck and more irreverence from Old Dirty. Then you get You God, who is actually giving you more of himself and you understand him more because you're hearing more from him as opposed to the first album. Same thing with Master Killer, same effect. GZA, we could throw him in that pile with Deck and Dirty, where he remains the same. And you could argue that you kind of might not get as much of him as you wanted because he's not as present on this side. And then Raekwon and Ghostface are now in this space where they're a little larger than what even they set themselves up to be because of what happened with the success of their individual solo albums. So they're just kicking the materialism and criminology up to the nth degree, right? And then Capadonna is rounding that out. He's like, you know, the center. If they're the Splash Brothers, then he's the Draymond Green with a lot of outlandish talk. And so that is the Clan. You're getting all of those personality dynamics rolled through different songs. Sometimes they're on songs together and they match well, but the songs where the combinations are utilized the best are in the unexpected matchups, where you're hearing the people you expect to hear together, Method Man, Raekwon and RZA, Raekwon and Ghostface. It's like, okay, cool, they do what they're supposed to do, but you know, you want a Wu-Tang album because you're getting those combinations. You don't want an extension of the solos. And so it is a little disheartening to have GZA so muted on this side because GZA was a huge part of the very first album. And I hate to keep comparing this album to Into the 36 Chambers, but we think of GZA being one of the first voices you heard when the album opened up with Bring the Ruckus. We're hearing him very prominently featured as the closer on 7th Chamber and Protect Your Neck. And then he has his own solo with Clan in the Front, which is this energetic personality fest with punchlines and everything. Just to hear him relegated to like a couple lines, a couple sleepy lines here and there is a lack happening. And we know Master Killer is not the most exuberant member of the Wu, and that's why you have members like Ghost and Capadonna to balance that out. But put it all together and it's nothing but personality shining through. So all those things create a compelling mix to keep you listening. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to Dimension 2. The suspension of disbelief or the believability. As indicated by what I pointed out with the RZA speaking intro and the Raekwon speaking outro, it kind of solidifies the idea that this is not an album asking for your suspension of disbelief, but rather really drilling home the point that this is the Wu. This is what we really do. This is what we're saying, which underscores a point that we make on this channel often, which is the idea that it's really hard to, defend rap as just being entertainment performance when you have rappers who make such efforts to go out their ways to do non-music tracks to talk and tell you how real what they're saying is. And in this case, it's just speaking to the fakeness of the industry and the copying that goes on in the industry. Wu-Tang being the biggest hip-hop group at that point, other than, again, arguably, debatably, Bone Thugs and Harmony, they were staking this claim and really airing out grievances against people who have come and taken elements of their style. One of the things being the alias thing, something that was definitely introduced to the hip hop world by Raekwon, only built for Cuban links in a commercial and widespread fashion where it caught on. I'm not saying that there weren't rappers before that had AKAs and aliases, but they made it popular, especially if you're gonna call yourself something other with like this mafioso inspiration or this comic book inspiration. They started that. So they were really, really pointing at that. RZA was really pointing at the production piece or the whole crew, because we started seeing the formation of these families, crews, posses, and all of that. The street edge is still there, but there's a lot more flashy talk because Wu-Tang is now in a position to not talk about wanting that, right? Ghost goes from being the guy on Can It Be All So Simple, I want a mansion in a place up in the spotlight, to knowing he has it. So they're talking about the kind of jewelry they're wearing. Even RZA, he's famously talking about those pointy rings that had become iconic. Everyone seemed a lot more comfortable, and the street tales were less about themselves and more about observations. So in Little Ghetto Boy, Raekwon is telling a story about someone from the hood. Same way Inspector Deck is kind of like weaving through on his solo. Yeah, there's no indicators here to say we're going into characters, not even for RZA, and they're barely using their aliases here. They're just kind of interchanging between calling each other by their rap name or their Wu Gambino name, but it always comes down to how much do you believe Wu-Tang Clan on this album. They stay in the lane that you've known Wu-Tang for. There's no escapades and bank heist or anything on here. Even the MGM story where Ray and Ghost are going back and forth talking about being front row for a fight is pretty digestible and not far-fetched, because you could see them doing that now, especially with the vivid detail going on. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, delivery and use of voice. You got 9. Very hard to feel like you're not getting unique textures of vocal delivery with so many personalities and with so many presences on the mic, right? The shining star, ironically here, is RZA himself. The duplicity of RZA having kind of his Bobby Digital, is before Bobby Digital existed to the masses persona present on here, and then his RZA the Abbott presence. Where you get the variation here is that whenever he's coming from that angle, there's more of a belligerent raucousness to his already uniquely emphasized consonant sound voice. Anybody who's watched the Wu-Tang series in American Saga knows that the actor portraying RZA goes out of his way to really try to capture that unique inflection that RZA has, where he's really pushing. It's a marble mouth, one of a kind tone, and then when he's doing that more forceful flow, it really comes out. So you'll hear it on lines like Duck Season, where he's like, "It's Wu-Tang, staying unchanged," or the way he famously comes in on Triumph, "March of the Wooden Soldiers, See, Cypher Punks couldn't hold us, right? As opposed to when he's in Abbott mode, you're gonna get this calm, kind of continuous, less effort bass stream like Hell's Windstaff or Impossible. Yo, the fusion of the 5 elements, the search for the higher intelligence. Another thing to mention about RZA playing with his voice, you're getting more of these creative inflection moments, like what he does on Triumph Waves. Perpendicular to the square, we stare, go like flare, escape from the dragon's lair. That purposeful voice crack and uppage, really interesting choices there, but he's really kind of the only one taking those risks creatively to stand out. Ghostface is going to do his regular projected inflection with lots of emotion and urgency. That's what Ghost raps with. Hey yo, break that! And then that's gonna come out. Raekwon raps with that same urgency, but he stays level. It really stays level with that heavy New York accent. Deck, the way he comes in, similar to how Raekwon always kind of like announces his arrival with the hey yo, hey yo, hey yo. On Hell's Windstaff, Inspector Deck kind of revs himself up with the ha 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 ha. So what you know about this? Like it's an announcement. Old Dirty is using the same inflections that he's always used that have made him famous. Except for on Heaters, you're getting more of this. It's almost a toned down Dirty, where he's focused on putting the words in a continuous pattern. So you're not getting that same push that you are expecting from Old Dirty, where it sounds like the words are just flying out of his mouth. You know, I be the iron side, get touched with the chloride. It's more this side mouth delivery. You God, every word there's a pump to You God's delivery where he's like, the thrill of victory, the agony defeat. You want to talk about announcement. His is a James Earl Jones recitation kind of delivery. Like if you ask James L. Jones to read Shakespeare, that's what You God's delivery is similar to on this album. Method Man, surprisingly, just calm. He's more observant on this album. Home on the range. You know, like every line is thought about and gives you breathing space to take in. Everything sounds methodical, which goes in line with his name. And then last but not least, Master Killer is coming with probably the most monotone delivery. And Jizza with his signature twang, where it sounds like he's chewing on a chew stick as he raps. War of the masses, the outcome's disastrous. Many of the victims' families say they ashes. So that's the scope. You put them together, it's a stew, it's a hodgepodge, it works. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 4, the flow. Now, admittedly, as a Wu-Tang head at this time, and I guess once a Wu-Tang head, always a Wu-Tang head, I did not realize when I was younger how much the flows were not evident and prominent on this album like on other Wu-Tang releases. This album was recorded in California when they were all housed in the Wu Mansion, and You God famously writes about this. The egos were apparent there. You God talks about how everyone was kind of fighting over which room they got based on what they felt they deserved, and he claims he took like the bottom room that nobody wanted because he just didn't care about the beef. He cared about the unity and getting the project done. But you can imagine the difference of doing your Hail Mary shot to put out your debut album, because everybody was like, this is all we got. Everybody pitched in. Everybody was hungry, coming straight from the project, to now we're recording in a mansion, and what the vibes and differences that arise from that will be. And so what you get is a way more relaxed version of the Clan. No matter how aggressive and hasteful or urgent some of their deliveries were, the flows are less apparent. So where even Old Dirty, you're gonna get hut 1, hut 2, hut 3, hut, Old Dirty Bastard live and uncut. You're not getting that from Dirty on this album. It's just kind of all over the place. When you get to his solo, he's just kind of talking. He's not riding the beat. And when he does, he's riding that simple drum pattern, which sounds like it was made simple to follow him. Or, ODB is naturally musically inclined, so he might catch the beat every now and then in between those belligerent moments, but it's like in between. Same could be said for Method Man, who was like the voice of the Clan on the first LP. Again, sorry to keep comparing this album to the other one, but it's hard not to speak on the differences that one would have to expect as a fan with a 4-year growth period. And so where Method Man was putting emphasis on these chancy patterns, here it's more about letting the words breathe. So you're not getting flows, get busy, bizarro, just follow with more. You're just not getting that. Method's not devoid of flow. So on tracks like For Bells of War and Hell's Windstaff, you're gonna get those moments where he's like, we can go platinum, but then still can't get no satisfaction. Once again, back on the block, crumb snatching. You're getting those moments of like deliberate patterns. But if you're going off songs like Projects, Deadly Melody, Duck Season, it's that which many of the Clan members use. RZA kind of stumbles all over most of his verses, and by the grace of God lands in pocket a lot of times. So like Hell's Windstaff and Impossible, those are very wordy verses where it's not clustered for the sake of syllable stacking. It's clustered in a way like, how many words can I fit in this sentence before I go off beat? So RZA's really careening words to the edge of possibility for not being off beat. So RZA doesn't go off beat, but he is doing everything he can before coloring outside the lines, sacrificing the grace of the pattern and crossing over the bar line just to get his point. He catches it right in time. Meanwhile, you get rappers like U-God, who is so safe with his delivery. Every line is going to land, and it reminds me of what Rakim was saying about the way he wrote, where he would like create these dots preemptively to mark where his bar was gonna land. Olympic torch flaming, we burn so sweet. The most fluid performance that you're getting from U-God is on Impossible, where U-God is weaving in and out of his verse in a fashion that you had not heard to that point. And he writes that it took him to this album to find his stride, because it was kind of this inside joke, and maybe not so much inside, because I think even outside of Wu-Tang, a lot of people in the hip-hop industry and in the casual listening world felt like U-God was a weak link and not capable of a flow. And he said it took him a while to catch his cadence and get his swag, and it started happening the year before this album on his appearances on other songs. It's very evident, but his default flow is to have this kind of line for line. So you'll hear that on Heaters, Bop, Talk, Sequence, Powerhouse, Kick Out. Raekwon is giving you only speeds are the difference in his flow pattern. So a lot of, I mentioned Ghost and I mentioned Ray. They both were squeezing a lot of words in their sentence to the point of mashing them together. So similar to RZA catching themselves right before going off beat, I think at times Ghostface does go a little off beat. On moments like Hell's Windstaff, Ghostface almost does it purposely. So that line, on a regular for robbing a good nigga's house, he speeds it up, and it sounds like he just really just wanted to be unorthodox. Even there, less of a flow, on Into the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, we're still coming in out of early 90s, where bouncy flows with a standard, right? To go, who I was living the life for Pablo Escobar. It is less need for that. Raekwon is just all about rapid fire here, but not so much with a flow because it's so conversational. And then if we're talking conversational, then it gets no more conversational than GZA and Master Killer, who sound mostly like they're just talking. It's not even sounding like rapping. It's the track renders helpless and suffers from multiple stab wounds and leaked sounds that's heard. So really the only one going out their way to have a flow pattern is Deck. So you're gonna hear that staccato flow pattern, but you're gonna get moments like specialist, hit you close range with this madness, unique design, shine like a deep dish, the beat kick, technique spit on your weak. Like he's got something to prove. And every time Deck shows up with that kind of attention to his flow, but again, his default is in this announcement kind of cadence. So MC wizardry, killer bee invasion, men of respect, bless the wisdom of the ancients. So there's breathing room in between these sequences of rhyming syllables. When you listen to The City, there's more fluidity of words connecting. Inspector Deck is all about the words connecting. So same way you get the contrast being played off when I was talking about the voices and the delivery, you get that in these bright shining moments like Deadly Melody, where one of the members will play off the last word said or the last syllable sound and rhyme off of it. Like when RZA comes in and goes, the bewildering, picking up from Method Man's last line. And you'll hear it in sequences like that, because I think it goes from Meth to RZA to Master Killer to You God, and GZA squeezes in and it goes right back to Meth. So it's like, check the 150 millimeter heater as it blows holes through your speaker. That's how Master Killer goes. And then You God picks it up with making you weaker, creeping into centimeters. Then GZA comes in, 50 caliber street sweeper shots from Shallon and go to Master Pequa. And then Meth comes right in and picks it up. Things will never be the same. And that things is the rhyming line. And that is special. Those are those special moments that, they could have gave us more of. Another thing that You God notes in his book is this hilarious theory he has that every song where he appears, or almost every song where he appears, RZA goes right after him or right before him. And that'd be an interesting game for y'all to play at home if you listen to this album and see how many times RZA is the preceding or following verse every time You God raps. It does happen, a few times. You might be on to something, but that was just a funny point. So varied flow patterns because of the differences of the 9 members, but the ones really making attempts to have distinct rhyme schemes are gonna be Method Man and Inspector Deck on this album, while everyone else was kind of just getting on a mic and letting the words lead them more so than the flow. But something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, the flow, that takes us to dimension 5, wordplay and bar intent. Wordplay. This is not Method Man's final form, so this is not the Method Man that we have come to see in subsequent Wu projects, whereas we move towards the 2000s, Method Man cared more about having really, really clever lines. This is more about slick lines, straight shots and dirty glasses. To that effect, each Wu-Tang member had about the same level of wordplay. Same way I mentioned You God, in his own words, finding his melody and the rhythm and catching the beat, getting his stride. Method Man becoming the more mellow version of himself, and RZA showcasing the more enlightened side of himself and the calmer side. You get the emergence of Raekwon and Ghost as the resident randomized rappers. They're just gonna throw words out, bird burglar, tarantula style, just anything that Hot Rocks and Fruit Gladja, you're getting that here. And it was a transition, or some may consider it an evolution, that didn't raise a lot of eyebrows at the time because the Wu-Tang wave and influence was just so big and prominent that people were eating up whatever was delivered. But in retrospect, you've heard a lot of people ask Ghostface, what were you talking about? And he said he doesn't even know. And I'm sure Raekwon's answer would be equally as interesting. But those are the changes that are evident here. And it's more about the flashiness of the braggadocio. Lots of imagery, materialism. Yeah, not a lot of reliance on other devices here. Metaphors are short-lived, but they're always in reference to some kind of comparison to an army, weaponry, devices, and narrative portraits. You get these moments where RZA says stuff like, trying to capture this paper to buy Shaquasia, Glacier, Melchizedek, a skyscraper. And that's his way of saying Wu-Tang money stays all up in the family, as they famously made a line in hip-hop history. He's talking about, making enough money to leave his children jewelry and land. And I thought that was a clever way of saying it. So that's the kind of language manipulation that you're gonna get from Wu-Tang, but that's the extent. You get like one line at a time of wordplay. So like when Raekwon says Mediterranean, see ya, play off of like lines like that, but you're not getting whole sequences. For the most part, the wordplay comes in spurts, a line here and there, and the bar intent is harder to pin down. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, which takes us to dimension 6, punchlines and poetic wisdom. In other Wu-Tang projects, or whenever Wu-Tang members are mentioned, I pointed out that it does seem like the only one who famously goes for the punchlines is Meth. Surprisingly, RZA delivers some punchlines on here, and so does Raekwon. We talk about lines like the pointy rings, but then there's a lot of name call outs here, right? So on the song Duck Season, RZA makes this line about Monica Lynch and Steve Rifkin, and Method Man makes this line about Tempest Bledsoe, of all people. I'm just like, whoa, how'd she catch the wrath, right? And these are crass lines. They're not like these super clever punchlines. And you're not gonna get super clever punchlines here. None of the members are going for that. Street Life has some of that in his verse on Deadly Melody, but for the most part, that's not the aim. It's more about the imagery and the comparative language. What am I comparing myself to? Cock back my tongue like a hammer. My head is like a nickel-plated Bama. Spit 45 caliber grammar. Like, it's clever, but it's not delivered in the sense of, I gotta rewind that because he put these together this way. I mentioned You God on the song Black Shampoo. It sounds like a poem. It sounds like a stream of consciousness poem where he was naming every aromatic ingredient he can think of. And at the end, they even say this is some old Body Shop stuff, right? I'll post it up so you can see it. That seemed to be the poetic slant to it. But when we talk about poetic wisdom, you're getting it mostly when the members go into their God body bag, and this is where they shine. That imagery is what reminds you that Wu-Tang are wordsmiths. No matter how randomized some of the places they go, it still gets contained by the direction that they lean into. And so on Impossible, the fluidity of You God's verse is matched by what he's talking about. The sentiment is, look, this is what's going on in the world outside of the hood, and you guys in the hood are just focusing on hood affairs, and there's a bigger war out there, and we need to galvanize and figure out how to combat it. Let's get it together. RZA is really going from a world history anthropological perspective to speak on the current social climate, right? So Can you imagine for one single idea, everything appeared here. Understanding makes my truth crystal clear. I mean, if ever the smoothest way to incorporate 5% teachings, since Grand Puba did, Wake Up, reprised on the first Brand Nubian album, that was so smooth. There's so much contextualized God body talk in there that if you know kind of thing, but it's still digestible for the masses if you follow it. And he even manages to throw in some comic book imagery and cartoon imagery, Space Knight like Rom, Kasu planets like Unicron, blasting photon bombs from the arm like Gavatron. And then Ghost comes in and completely brings it home strong and gives you a human effect where You God and RZA sound like philosophers speaking on the scope of the world. Ghostface brings it back down to earth. The poetic wisdom is coming in their commentary about life. And so you're gonna hear real poetic language used in verses like Ghost's verse, where in his descriptiveness, he makes time to say lines like, "It feel like my man was cast out to heaven that we share." He didn't have to say that, he could have kept it all this very visceral description of his mom coming out the house with a nightgown, holding her chest, but the descriptiveness is where the poeticism is, but then he takes it up a notch with lines like that, just sprinkled in there. You God does the same thing, RZA does the same thing, all on that track. So poetic wisdom is what Wu delivers most and what they deliver best. And it's something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 7, concepts. MGM is the most standout concept. The idea of two of these members being in Las Vegas, which was cleverly put right after Bell's Award, where there's a little break in the song where you hear Raekwon and Ghostface talking about the upcoming fight or the fight being canceled. It only makes sense that the next song they're in Vegas watching a fight. I thought that was pretty clever, and they masterfully, I meant to bring this up in the delivery section too. I don't know if you hear them do this on another song again, where they just line for line, or every 2 lines at least, they're just really completing each other's sentences. This is magic. This is the magic of Ghost and Ray that you were hoping to hear, and you get it. And it's a nice break from everything else going on, because it's this conceptualized song that's not street based, it's not challenging other rappers. It exists. It's flashy. And it's shouting out other people. I think Smooth the Hustler gets a shout out on there randomly. There you go. Other than that, you're gonna get Black Shampoo, which is also pretty conceptual, again, because of You God's approach. It's not just the quote unquote girl song. It's like this, let me relax with you after a long day. Let me cater to you, you cater to me. But this is the way I'm gonna go about it. I'm gonna reference all of these fragrant elements. So, it's up to you to decide whether you feel those concepts are strong or weak. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Now that takes us to Dimension 8 and Dimension 9. These are the content dimensions. So Dimension 8 being external content, things Wu-Tang is talking about outside of themselves, is outside of the internal monologue, social, worldly things being spoken on. And then internal is going to be how much of that autobiographical exposition are you getting. Little Ghetto Boys, like I said, Raekwon made a legitimate effort to try to talk about the ills of the hood through a story. And this highlights one of the things you'll find on this album. The togetherness is lacking on a lot of songs because the members don't sound like they're on the same accord. And so you get a song like Little Ghetto Boys where Raekwon sounds like he is trying to match the mood of the song, and where RZA was trying to go with the sample and the beat to talk about a street story that ended tragically, right? This one was crying at her son's funeral, involved in the street life. But then when Capadonna comes in for his verse, he's kind of just doing bragging rap. He's rapping about Wu-Tang's presence in the industry, his own presence in the industry, comparing himself to other rappers, and that's where he goes with that. Total different direction for the song, and for those to be the only two verses, it does something to the song. Same way Projects, where the other performers on the song are kind of just doing brag rap, and Ghost comes in really X-rated, aggressively talking to a woman where it sounds like he's having sex with her. He doesn't even want to have sex with her, but he's going into so much descriptive detail about her body parts and the sexual experience being unpleasant. And it's like, well, why did you even do this, girls? And at the end, he's like, you know, you got AIDS, I'm shaking in my bones. And it's like, what? You know, where did he just take us, and why did he take us? Is this his way of saying this is what happens in the projects? But it's so standout from the rest of the verses, and not necessarily in the best way. That idea that everyone wasn't on a similar page on this album. It's cool because that's what makes everyone an individual, but where are we going as a group? On The City, a similar thing happens. You kind of get lost in the picture that he's trying to paint. It's not the most linear narrative. And then, of course, Impossible, where we mentioned RZA and You God really talking from a worldly perspective with 5% sensibilities about the state of things. And then Ghostface bringing it home with this heartfelt tale. It's continuing what he pioneered on the Iron Man album with All That I Got Is You. Other than that, you know, Black Shampoo is content because it's topical, but there's no other songs that have a clear direction. Duck Season sounds like Wu-Tang is talking to the industry, but that's more like the feel than the substantial framework of that song. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. As far as internal, you know, I talked about Inspector Deck's solo, The City, where he kind of goes in and out of speaking for the hood and then speaking for himself. And there's a question mark about how autobiographical this is, as opposed to when you compare it to something like his famous verse on Cream, where it was no doubt that he was talking about himself, right? Handcuffing back of a bus, 40 of us, life as a shorty shouldn't be so rough. It's not so evident on here, and you get that it's supposed to be a commentary on the hood. That's not lost on the listener, I believe, but the direction gets a little wonky. So going back to that on Impossible, I think Ghostface revealed later on that this story wasn't based on a true story. It was kind of like a composite of different incidents in the hood growing up in Staten Island, and he just put it in a verse, but it wasn't like based on one real life tale of a friend who died in his arms. Yeah, other than that, you're not getting a lot of talk about how I feel outside of a bragging context. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to a final dimension, dimension 10, storytelling. I mentioned most of the rappers prefer to take a narrative approach to things, and that's what you're getting on Little Ghetto Boys, The City, MGM, Impossible. Those are the big story moments. You get story elements on the projects and in every Ghostface verse, in most of Raekwon's verses. GZA raps in story mode. Many of the victims' families saved their ashes, but how focused and how good the storytelling is something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. And on that note, that concludes our category 2 review and analysis of the classic Disc 2 of the double album Wu-Tang Forever, which turns 25. Thank you for being here for the journey. And we're still forming this global hip-hop community. Wu-Tang is forever. Wu-Tang is for the children. Leave your comments, leave your rankings on the Rap Ruler or below. Let me know what you think. And until then, until next time, y'all know what it is. F for Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth. So